Well, we're about to take off, and you'll notice that this camera is mounted on the hood of the car, and you're going to be seeing, I think, some amazing sights today. And I'm so glad you're all going to come with us on this epic day trip in northern New Mexico. We're going to call it the Second Enchanted Circle. The road not taken, or the road less traveled, whatever strikes your fancy. But we're pretty excited about this, and let's go. All right, Jack. So tell us where we are and what I'm about to partake of here.
We're the first building south of the St. James Hotel. It's called the Cimarron Mercantile. And originally it was the Barlow and Sanderson stage and freighting company. And they have a history here of taking freight and passengers up into the gold fields around Elizabethtown and at Ute Park. And a very famous guy by the name of James Butler Hickok, Bill Hickok, used to run freight for them over Raton Pass. And this was in a state of disrepair, but not beyond repair.
But this is the original store we're seeing here, right?
Yeah, this is the original, and the offices as well. And the CS Ranch very nicely restored the place, put a lot of money into it, and protected it for future generations. And they've just done a very nice job. Even though they altered it from what its original use was, they've maintained the integrity of the historical aspects of it.
But as fascinating as the history is, we're not really here for the history.
No, what we're here for is going to have the best burrito in, I think, northern New Mexico.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And with apologies to the St. James, but it is.
All right. I'll be the judge of that. It weighs a couple pounds.
Yeah. I'm making a mess.
That's really good. Now, how did we order this?
It's a New Mexican with chorizo. Scots are in town.
So, Jack, and the other thing I need you to talk about is this is the prelude to a big, long, exciting day that we have.
We're going
What's
back
happening?
into the Valley Vidal, the Valley of Life, which is a special unit of the U.S. Forest Service, 100,000 acres of Carson National Forest. It's managed as a separate unit, and it's got one of the largest single elk herds in the state. We are purposely have driven from Eagle Nest to go in from the east side, so that as we go through the morning, the sun will be behind us, and we will go through the plains up into Pinyon Juniper Life Zone, from there into Ponderosa, and from that up into alpine and subalpine forests. 72 miles from US 64 to the town of Castilla, which is north of Taos. It's a 72-mile drive. It's incredible. It's a bit of Yellowstone, I think, ripped up and set down here in northern New Mexico. It's adjacent to Ted Turner's Vermejo Park Ranch, and a new acquisition, which was bought by, it used to be the Colfax Land and Cattle Company, the Forest Service Nature Conservancy. Bought another 60,000 acres.
So this is not a trip around the block. This is an all-day adventure.
It is, and we're going to fly fish back in the on Comanche Creek and on the Rio Castilla. Castilla is Rib River. And there is a restoration of Rio Grande cutthroat trout back there. So we should have a good day.
Yeah, so it's going to be a two-parter.
10,000 acre meadow.
Oh, yeah. Well, we're going to see the Clayton Corral.
You don't have to stay quiet. Chime in.
Yeah.
I won't identify you by name.
There are going to be some very special
We have a
places
guest.
up here. Yeah, she's on work release from the local women's prison.
And
No, the men's prison.
so this is going to be a two-parter, you're saying, because I'm going to have enough.
Maybe
film for it.
3.
I got lots of battery packs and stuff. As I'm listening to you, I'm thinking, is this yet another enchanted circle?
This is the circle less traveled, which is what I've always billed this as. The circle less traveled. And there are a number of them here. We're starting out in Cimarron, which is on the west side of the shortgrass plains here. Northeast New Mexico, east central New Mexico have the most intact shortgrass plains left on the continent. They extend up into Colorado as well, extreme southeast part of the state, and largest elk herd on the plains anywhere in North America. And,
There's the beautiful scenery and the wildlife, but the history. I just bought another book on the area. This is Colfax County. That's where we are. We're also in, what's the name of the valley we're in? So it's pronounced correctly?
Valley Vidal, Valley of Life. Vallevidal, the Valley of Life.
I was thinking Moreno Valley, but
Moreno Valley is where we
it's
live.
Merino or Moreno?
Moreno.
Moreno.
Likely a surname, but it means brown in Spanish. That's likely was a surname of some forgotten sheep herder, I'm guessing.
But when I look at this book, the cover of it reminds me of the history here is not insignificant by any stretch of the imagination. We're with stone's throw of the Santa Fe Trail where we sit right now.
We're sitting on it.
We're sitting on the Santa Fe Trail.
We are on the mountain branch of the Santa Fe Trail. And we'll see some ruts out here as well.
And
this book that you've got was written by Steve Zimmer. And Steve was the historian for Philmont Scott Ranch. Steve's not with us anymore, but he was a good guy. He used to come up to the museum, as a matter of fact, put on lectures and discussions, and was a very entertaining fellow.
well, to the people that don't have exposure to it or don't remember from school days, the Santa Fe Trail wasn't like a place people went hiking. It was a highway.
Yeah,
West.
it was a trail of commerce. It wasn't an immigrant trail. It was a trail of commerce from Missouri to Santa Fe. And there are two different branches, the mountain branch and the Cimarron cutoff. And it was opened in 1821 and ran until the railroads co-opted it in the 1882 or so, I think it was.
But in its heyday, it was an interstate highway by anyone's definition. And the spur here through Cimarron was well traveled by very familiar names, which if you ever visit the hotel here, the St. James, you'll find the likes of Wild Bill Hickok, Wyatt Earp, Doc Holliday, and many others.
Jesse James.
Jesse James. There are a lot of tall tales having to do with the hotel, but as research that I've done, the greater than 12 murders taking place in the hotel is not hyperbole. It's historic fact.
Bullet holes.
And there are bullet holes to this day in the ceiling of the saloon. And they were very deliberate about how they did the ceiling and floor so their guests sleeping upstairs wouldn't die in gunfights while they slept in their beds.
They killed the ceiling, all right, I'll tell you that.
Killed the ceiling. All right, well, today we're going to be using all of my cameras today, And mostly they're going to be mounted outside Jack's vehicle. So no more through the windshield today. We're going to have amazing views of this country. So thanks for joining us, and you're going to see amazing stuff. Go.
Just leaving Cimarron, about 8:14 in the morning. We're heading over into a little drainage over here on the Ponil, P-O-N-I-L, Ponil Creek River. It would be a creek back east. There's a river here. We're in the middle of 1.7 million acre Beaubien-Miranda land grant, which later become the Maxwell land grant. That was granted in 1841 to Beaubien, Carlos Beaubien, a Canadian, and a guy named Miranda, who was the secretary of the then governor, and it was granted to buffer the United States influence in this area. So 1841 is granted. 1844, some character named Kit Carson and a couple of his buddies went into ranching here in 1844. Unfortunately, the grizzlies were so thick in this area, they were killing off all the livestock and eating the crops. So those guys gave up on that and headed up to Bent's Fort. Since the fur trade was over, they were at loose ends, and a lot of them were hooking up with the early stages of westward migration. And Carson fortunately hooked up with a guy named John C. Fremont, and the rest, as they say, is history about the exploration and how this ultimately became the United States of America in 1848 after we picked a war in 1846. We are on the mountain branch of the Santa Fe Trail, and off to the right are a couple of Gonzalitas and Rayado Mesa, separated by an area called Horse Thief Gap. And we are at a Santa Fe Trail crossing right now. It goes to the right here, and it goes down to cross the Ponil and the Cimarron River. Directly in front of us is a large flat top mountain called Tinaja.
Now, Horse Thief Pass has a history related to a series of train robberies, if I remember correctly.
That would have been out beyond those in a little town called Folsom, as in Folsom Point. But what you're looking at those are a series of mountains that are lying along a fault line, or as it's referred to, the Jemez lineament. Starts in Jemez Mountains over at Los Alamos and ends over in the panhandle of Oklahoma at the highest point, Black Mesa.
Yeah.
So these are all volcanic mountains here. They're called prairie outliers. We have probably some of the most magnificent plains scenery, mountain scenery in North America. Glacier National Park, the Rocky Mountain Front, perhaps the Black Hills, but this is definitely in the top three. And as I mentioned earlier, it's the most intact shortgrass plains left on the continent. We're headed to a turnoff here. We're on US 64 heading east, and we're doing this because we want the sun behind us as we're traveling. And we're going to be making a turn off about 5 miles outside of town here. We'll be coming up on it shortly.
Oh, that's what that big white glowing ball in the middle of the picture is. That would be the sun.
Yeah.
And forgive me that you might not be able to see these mountains we're looking at because it's kind of hazy, and I'm looking at my monitor and I can't really see them. But if you have a big screen TV, I bet you can see them. Now, how close are we to Colorado at this point?
Probably 20 air miles due north.
And then as we go through, do we get any closer to it as we go through our drive
we could
today?
probably get to a point where you can probably throw a rock into Colorado. Where we're going to come out in Costilla is literally about a half mile from the Colorado state line. Off to the left, the series of buttes and mesas that you see are the southern terminus of the Park Plateau. And we'll be going up one of these canyons here to get back into the high country. say. And our turnoff will be coming up here shortly. Looking right now for pronghorn. We have the largest southern herd of pronghorn left on the continent. We have a lot of pronghorn actually. Our habitat here has remained pretty constant. And for one reason, the lack of water, it's still rangeland. It's very little farming done here. Unlike the northern Rockies, where most of the plains, a lot of the plains, not most, a lot of the plains in the northern Rockies have been diverted to agriculture and dry land, wheat, and a number of other things. But the guys who first came across the Santa Fe Trail in 1821, this would look substantially like what they saw it, except for obviously the power lines and a couple of other things.
And their trail was not paved.
And the trail was not paved. They thought it was paved with gold, but it certainly... So up until the Civil War, this commerce between the United States and Mexico, and then with New Mexico, was a very critical thing. It wasn't until the Civil War that we had a established national currency. Prior to that, it was the Mexican peso that was generally, that was the money that was exchanged most in the United States, and obviously came from here. The dollar sign, by the way, is actually the sign for a peso, so we co-opted that for our dollar. And you can see we're on the plains here now. We are, there are a number of large land holdings here. CS Ranch, CS Charles Springer Ranch, major player. He built Eagle Nest Dam and the lake, obviously. And we are on Ted Turner's, the southern end of Ted Turner's Vermejo Park Ranch, which, by the way, extends all the way into Colorado. And that's 558,000 acres here, and he owns another 500,000 acres down near Truth or Consequences. So, we'll be making a turn here shortly, and we'll get back with you after we make that turn and start up the dirt road.
Sounds good. We'll see you in a minute. All right, we're on the air.
We just turned off US 64 after an abortive overshot the runway kind of thing, and we had to turn around to come back because I was too busy BSing you guys. So, McChrystal Campground 30, Ring Place 30, Cherie Ponds 38, Cimarron Campground 40, and it doesn't say, but it's 72 miles to the little town of Castillo, New Mexico.
So Cimarron Campground, is that part of Cimarron State Park?
No, it's just the name of it.
And is it BLM? Or who owns it?
No, these are Forest Service
Forest
campground.
Service.
Right.
And is it a pay campground? Are we going to go through it?
Yeah. We're going to go through that, and we're going to go through McChrystal Campground. Cimarron, McChrystal will be the first one. And that is... it's in the Ponderosa Pine Forest. We're on the plains right now. Out ahead of us, what you're looking at is what they call PJ, which is pinyon juniper, which is the next. As you go up in elevation, in the American West, when you go up in elevation increase means moisture, and lack of it means dry. So the plant communities change as you go up in elevation because they get more moisture. And so we go from grasslands, which is where we're at now, and we've got cholla cactus, we got a little bit of Gamble oak, not much, a lot of sunflowers, seeing the occasional odd juniper popping up here, and a cactus called cholla, 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 LL pronounced like a Y in Spanish. And this is what you're looking at directly ahead of you, is, as I said earlier, was the Park Plateau. So this is the southern edge of the Park Plateau, which extends on up into Colorado as well.
So we're headed north right now, technically.
We are headed north, yep. And this is the Romeo Park Ranch. This is Ted Turner's ranch. And we're going to be traveling through most of his ranch until we get to the actual 100,000 acre unit of the Valley Vidal. And for those of you who are elk hunters, it's a once in a lifetime permit back there. And there's some big bulls. Well, there's a lot of bull hanging around in the car right now.
So I saw one of the signs said you're going through a lot of private property, and the road is a right of way. You'll be trespassing if you wander off the road.
Right. Well, it's 120 foot right of way, so that's where the fences are running here. 120 feet, I think, is the standard.
And I see an arroyo there to the right.
Right. Yes, and that is some water source. I think it's Sarazoso Canyon. I should know that, but I don't. Rob will correct that later when we figure out what it is, but I'm pretty sure it's Sarazoso. Most of these, at this time of the year, even though there may be water higher up in elevation, it dissipates before it actually makes it down to the Cimarron River and then ultimately into the Canadian River. And the Canadian River has nothing to do with Canada, but in Spanish, C-A-N with an accent over the N is pronounced like a Y, so it's Cañada, which is a type of cannon. So, and if you can see up high, we're transitioning now from, at least in elevation, we're getting into ponderosa pines up on these high bluffs and mesas that are to our left and right.
I was going to ask you about what will our approximate elevation changes be today?
Now we're going to be up around 10,000 feet, and we're about 6,000 now, so we're going to have about a 4,000 foot elevation gain. We're close to that. Actually, we'll check it at the high point. I'll pull it up and we'll get an elevation reading. In fact, we're going to get an elevation reading right now. This is called multitasking. Don't do this at home, kids. Let's see, where are we?
I just realized this will make a great addition to the museum playlist.
Yeah.
Because you do talk about this.
We're at 6,510 feet in elevation right now. And I have had, in my lifetime, I have had 2 flats on 3 different occasions. Once in the Sierra Madres in southern Wyoming and twice here. But that was after they had just put down some very sharp rocks on this road. So I think we'll probably be in good shape.
Well, you did say we're inviting your friend Maureen,
Yeah.
in case we have a flat, she could change it for us.
Well, that plus, but you have to understand, Maureen usually brings some kind of natural disaster with her, but I don't know if that's going to cover tires. Is it, Maureen?
No, that's why I brought you as a natural
There
disaster.
you go. So, yeah. So, and we're following this water course, and if you can see to the right, you can see some old cut banks in here. Really, the best way to drive this is because you have this sense of what happens as you go up in elevation and how the plants change, and wildlife is going to change too. But it's a long way to Tipperary from here, and we're hopeful to see. We're hoping to see a bear, so that Rob could say.
That I've seen a bear.
Answer that question. Where does a bear? Never mind. We'll talk about that later.
But I've been talking about it since I was 12 years old. I developed on a trip to Idaho a fascination with bears by a book called Grizzly by N.O. St. Mills. It totally fascinated me. And I actually lived in Idaho years later for 5 years, and I've never seen a bear. I even went to Alaska, didn't see any bears.
Well, let's. I already phoned it in. We're going to cue the bear here shortly, I hope.
Oh, there's an old abandoned building.
There is an abandoned adobe ranch house here, by the way. We're not sure.
Quite. Oh no, it's on screen. It's right there.
The Greg Carlisle has told me who this belonged to. And Greg is the dam master, by the way, or as I refer to him, the dam master. But
who you met if you're watching my videos.
Yeah. So, yeah, that would have been a hard scrabble here. There probably was a spring here. Not probably. I'm sure there was a spring here emanating somewhere off the side of this little mountain we're climbing up right now.
We're about to see how good this stabilization program is.
Well, we're gonna. It's a washboarding here. When Turner bought this land, he bought it from Pennzoil, and Pennzoil maintained the mineral rights, subsurface rights. And so just after Turner bought it, they wanted to come in here and drill, and of course they had the right to do that. But since he maintained the surface rights, he said, yeah, you can drill, but you're going to drill it the way I want you to drill it. And so each one of these pad sites had multiple wells drilled on them, and they were all painted either green or a buff color so that they would blend into the scenery, and we probably won't see many of them today at all. But it's been drilled, and there's oil and natural gas coming out of here. So this is probably about the worst the road is going to be, by the way. At least that's our fervent hope. It's been a week or two since I've been back here, so. And we will talk to you up ahead here a little bit further, but you can see probably the lower 25% of the road is through this canyon. When we break out into some of the meadows, we'll get back at you. Well, as a point of reference, I have seen two things. One of them looked like a roadrunner, probably was, and then I just saw a coyote, but my two traveling companions didn't, and they're doubting that I've seen one. So, Rob, when you look at this, let's make sure just prior to this point, you check and see if you see that coyote. It'll be on the
I
left
believe
side.
you because right after there, I saw that little box by the side of the road.
Oh, man.
It said Acme on it.
Acme, yeah. There are plants to the right, little purple plants down on the bottom. That is Rocky Mountain bee balm. And if we get a closer look at here, I'll measure it. So we've climbed up out of those little arroyos that were characterized and we're actually up now on the park plateau. And you can see we're starting to get into these long meadows. We have had an incredibly wet year, and these meadows, which should be pretty brown by this time of year, are very lush, and it's beautiful. And there's prairie coneflower here, and lots of different wildflowers. Indian paintbrush.
That's the only one I know. Sunflower and Indian paintbrush.
Prairie coneflower. This is this one here. That's it there. And the red one there is beard tongue or firecracker pen salmon. And we've climbed up through the pinyon juniper. Is less dominant now. We're starting to get into more and more of the ponderosa pines, which are the next level of flora as you're climbing up in elevation. And we'll go from that into subalpine and then almost into alpine. And the tree species will change as we do that.
Oh, traffic.
Yeah, unfortunately. Now we got a little bit of dust.
He didn't seem to slow much for us.
No, no.
There's another one.
There's another one, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, geez, there's a... Phew. Was that California plate, wasn't it? That's unfortunate because...
Another one.
There's the third one. We're just going to let him go by because we're considerate, unlike the last two that went by here at about 900 miles an hour.
This guy's slowing down.
Yeah.
He's going.
Yeah, it reminds me, I'm watching what this guy's driving, and when my dad went from a Chrysler New Yorker during the gas crunch to a Honda Civic station wagon, and he sold the Chrysler to my uncle, and after that, they were going up to camp, and my uncle came over, picked my father up, and handed him the keys, and says, "Here, drive a real car again." So after a couple miles, my Uncle Mike says to my dad, "Well, what do you think of the car?" My dad said, "I feel like I'm sitting on a toilet driving a house compared to that Honda." So
In the late 60s, I can't swear to the year, but my very conservative father, I mean, I don't mean politically conservative,
Yeah.
but my dad wasn't chief, but he had 5 kids that all needed to go to college, and none of them were going to get scholarships. So I mentioned his fantasy was to do what John Steinbeck did. And I actually remember as a 6 or 7-year-old going to a place like a car dealership that had a truck with a camper on it for sale. And I remember climbing in there, and he never bought it. Right? But the one thing he did buy in the 1960s that everyone was shocked was a Mustang.
oh, there you go.
He bought a Mustang.
Well, there you go. Your dad was a fly fisherman.
Oh, yeah. Avid. And he passed that on to my brother Frank.
Well,
He was an avid one.
fly fisherman,
Oh.
and he passed it on to my older brother Frank, who is certainly surpassed my father. And all that noise was the microphone falling from its perch, by the way. So he surpassed the master, and is doing a lot of like Jack is doing. He teaches kids in the summer.
Valley Vidal units, another 10 miles.
Carson National Forest.
Yes,
That name Carson keeps coming up around here. What's that all about?
that's Kit Carson.
Big name in Taos. You can't turn around without seeing
Yeah, and
some reference.
Some misguided people have labeled him a genocidal maniac because of his dealings with Native Americans. Unfortunately, this is what I call revisionist history. The luxury of an opinion requires one to have the facts, and a lot of these people are motivated by stupidity or lack of capacity to read, in my view. And I'm going to get into something here I probably shouldn't. But anyhow, Kit Carson was married to 2 Native American women, by the way. The first one died in childbirth. The second one divorced him. And then he married a Josefa Jaramillo in Taos. And he was a colonel in the United States Army, later to become a brigadier general, by the way. And he had a direct order. The Navajos were a raiding society, by the way. And that's the reality. They were raiders. And raiders meant that they killed and stole and pillaged, and that was what part of it was. So did the Apaches, as a matter of fact. Carson, after a particularly egregious raid on New Mexico settlements, Carson was ordered by Brigadier General James Carleton to go out to the Navajo reservation and kill every male over the age of 12. Which, by the way, he did not do that, and for which he could have been court-martialed and shot or hung. But he did go out there and didn't fire unless he was fired upon, but he did do a scorched earth, destroyed crops, and cut trees down.
But he didn't deliberately murder.
But he didn't deliberately murder anybody. But in today's world, he was a man of his times, and to try and the imposition of our social mores on a guy from back then just seems a little bit unfair, damn it. And like I said, he in deference to not wanting to kill people wholesale, he could have been hung and court-martialed and hung, and he didn't do that. But there are people who have characterized him in a nasty way. Anyhow, one more thing about Kit Carson. A guy named Hampton Sides wrote a book called Blood and Thunder, probably the most authoritative piece that's ever been written on Kit Carson. Again, Blood and Thunder, Hampton Sides. And I'll shut up about that. We're seeing bluebirds.
I just saw a bluebird fly right in front of the camera.
And it's incredible. These meadows are just incredible. And the guns that won the West were the Colt and Winchester 1873, so they say. But as one of my salty ranchers once said, hell, they may have tamed it, but they didn't. They may have tamed it, but they didn't win the West. What won the West is right smack dab in the middle of that frame right there, and that's a windmill and water. Mark Twain said, "Whiskey's for drinking and water's for fighting over." And truer words were never spoken.
So there are going to be those of you that are watching this right now, maybe on a big screen, high definition television, and you think, well, you turn to your wife and say, Martha, this is where we're going for vacation next summer.
Yeah.
And we'd like you to come. We'd like you to visit Eagle Nest. And if you do come, there's a little visitor center and museum that's kind of hard to miss in town. And if you come on Saturdays, you're while we're open, there's about 100% chance of meeting me and Dottie, and there's a on average a 50 to 75% chance of Jack being there, because what he does is he says to his wife, "I'm going to the museum to pick something up, I'll be right back," and he sits down and talks and stays pretty much the whole time.
Well, all of that just ties into the fact that I'm a fly fisherman and a known liar.
And we have probably a dozen events at the museum every summer, tours and lectures, and if this stuff interests you, show up at the museum and donate. We're a 501c3 nonprofit, and we all work there for free out of love for this beautiful country.
Well, this is going to be a characteristic of our travels for the next few miles. We're going to shut this thing down for right now, and we'll see you again when we cross into the Valley Vidal into an area called Poneil Park. Earlier, I mentioned that we were crossing the Poneil River where Kit Carson and then went into ranching in 1844. We're going to be up here at the headwaters, which is it's a restoration of the Rio Grande cutthroat trout that they're doing up here. Both the feds, the state, and Turner on his property as well is doing a restoration for Rio Grande cutthroat trout. Probably of the roughly 20 or 30 species of cutthroat trout that exist, I think that the Rio Grande cutthroat trout is probably the most beautiful. If not, it's right up there. So,
well, y'all continue to see the scenery, but we're turning off the microphone because we need to talk about the location of buried bodies and undiscovered treasure. So we'll be back on the air soon.
look out ahead of you.
What do we see?
Mountains.
Oh, there are mountains out there.
Yep.
There are mountains in these here mountains.
Yep. This will be the first glimpse you're going to get. Look at what it's called, the Culebra, or the Snake Range. And it's named the Snake Range not because there's a lot of snakes
Now,
there. Because
do you know what that
snakes.
particular mountain was called?
That's probably Costilla Peak. We'll find out. I could be a little bit disoriented here, but I think that's what it is. And we're going to see those up close and personal here in a little bit. So, but we're going to take a break when we get over that way to educate a few trout. So,
all right. Well, you're going to be seeing scenery and hearing some AI generated music.